Boruto, episode 44, Shikadai's Doubts. This episode, of course, is the second or third, depending on how you want to look at it, episode in the Byakuya Gang arc. This one was not as cool as I was hoping it was going to be. We did get a decent, super tiny action sequence early on with whatever the team is going to be called, but Denki, Iwabe, and Metal. And we got to see Iwabe use the mud wall technique, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, I didn't expect him to, they even reference it in the episode, like, he's gotten stronger. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. That takes some real skill. He makes a whole dome and everything. So we got that quick little sequence. Denki, is totally useless, so Metal had to come in and, shatter basically like a ice bullet, and that like shattered his arm. So got that quick little sequence. Not much else. Is just like, hey, you're not supposed to do this. We got to see Konohamaru's buddy. I can't even think of his name right now, but I was like, oh, that's the dude. They said his name, and then I was like, oh, that's him. He didn't even look like he did when he was younger. So I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's him. And then after that, I felt like not really much happened in this episode. I was kind of expecting it to be a bit cooler than this, and it seems like the next episode is really where they're going to go for what I thought was going to be in this one, which is Shikadai actually realizing that the kid is with the Byakuya gang. And I was like, okay, that's kind of what I was hoping for. I thought that was the whole point of this, was, Shikadai going through this concept of, are these people good? Are they bad? And even that element, even though it's called Shikadai's Doubts, I felt like even that was only touched on in like one sequence when they're actually playing shogi. And I was like, I felt like, it was an important sequence, but I still felt like even that scene itself was super duper short, and it didn't seem like it focused, the rest of the episode at least didn't seem like it focused enough on Shikadai. But there were some elements that I did like, them talking about, Byakuya gang and how they're, considered noble thieves, and they have Himawari ask Hinata, like, are they good or are they bad? And then Boruto is like, they're bad guys, like they're helping people, but it's the way that they're doing it that ultimately means they're still bad guys, and that's how you have to look at it. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's like even getting down to Himawari, who I don't think even goes to school. I guess she was just at home and it was just on the news. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's kind of seeping into society, and they talk about that at the end of the episode where the gang members themselves, like, we got help from these certain individuals. And I was like, well, that's actually kind of cool. Like, it's showing that them basically being, the ninja version of Robin Hood and, his gang of merry men, they are building up this reputation. They're technically, they're bad, they're thieves, but they're helping people who can't get help in other situations. And Boruto, I think, is the one that brings it up the most, with a very specific example, of course, being Naruto as the Hokage, where it's like the Hokage is supposed to look out for everyone within the city and the village and, stuff like that, to make sure everything's perfect. But I thought it was kind of cool. I did like that concept. Like I said, as far as the Shikadai thing, I feel like they should have just called it a different title, because it made it seem like it was going to focus so much on him in this episode. And there's definitely, focus there, but I felt like it wasn't, like I said, like it was that one sequence, and that was towards the end of the episode. That was in like the last 10 minutes. So I was like, okay, it didn't seem like it focused nearly as much on Shikadai as I thought it was going to, but I still like the concepts that they introduced where people were kind of talking about it, and it's like, okay, well, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? So those elements I liked, but ultimately I felt like nothing really happened. It was them doing that where everyone's talking about it, and I felt like, okay, sure, but you can have that, like, so succinct. Like, everything that they talked about, I felt like could have easily been thrown into, like, the first half of the episode, where, maybe shorten up the sequence, because it's not like anything happened. It was like, mud wall, and then it was done anyway. It was super fast. But I felt like there's just little stuff that they could have cut out, and then it goes right into, all the different kids having their conversations and stuff like that, because they have it when they're in the restaurant, and then I believe they have a second one as well. But I was like, okay, like I said, I felt like all that could have just been crammed in together, and then we could have got something a little bit cooler, or maybe, like I said, if they did a bigger action sequence, it would have made it feel like a little bit more useful of an episode, because it just seemed like they were kind of repeating the same thing. It was just, are they good? Are they bad? It was coming from, different perspectives, but it wasn't even coming from that many perspectives. It was during the scene where all the kids were in like their little hangout spot, and that was it. And that was probably like the shortest moment where they really even talked about it, like that and Boruto at his house. But it was like, okay, I felt all of that could have just been crammed together, a little bit closer. But I enjoyed it for those elements, but I still felt like it was just like, it was a talky episode, and the talking points were exactly the same. It was just from different points of view. And I was like, I kind of just wish a little bit more happened. I did not hate the episode. It was just kind of one of those episodes where it's like, I really do like them talking about it, but also it's just them talking about the same thing. Like, it doesn't develop where it's like, the kids talk to the adults and stuff like that. Like they kind of do it a little bit, but for the most part, it's just what the kids think about it and stuff. And I was like, that's like the one thing I think could have elevated it a little, where the kids talk about it amongst themselves, and then they asked their parents. Like Himawari was, obviously not even around the other students, but she was the one who asked her mom, and it would have been cool if some of the other kids asked their parents, like, what do you think of this? Like, what do the older generation characters think of these noble thieves, considering what they've gone through with, the Great War and just all the chaos, within the village itself, and technology and things like that, which they also reference. The technology boom has kind of strained the village a little bit in certain ways. I would like to have seen what they wrote, what they could have written for the older characters. I think that would have made this episode even cooler if it touched on what the adults thought, considering, not only are they obviously the classic characters, but we would get to see their perspectives and how they think about it, like what they did with Shikamaru, where he talks about sacrifice and how he hated that idea so much, but things have changed, and he's gotten, he may not like the idea, but he's gotten more adept at kind of accepting it and knowing what it means. So I think that would have been a bit cooler if they kind of pulled that again with, and they could have done it even with Tamari, because she did have a cool focus in this. She was actually going around, she was fighting. I was hoping when she was fighting that would be another really epic action sequence too, but it was kind of just a chase sequence, and she did like the same move a few times, but it was still cool to see her actually fight. So I was like, well, that's pretty awesome. I didn't think we'd really see like any of the adults fight like at all until we got to like the Boruto movie stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool, even if it was a couple of quick swipes and they just dodged, and that was pretty much it. But I still thought that was cool. I was like, okay, that's nice. She had Boruto tried to have Shikadai help as well, and then the kid ends up escaping, and that was pretty much it. So I was like, all right. I assume he's gonna get busted in the next episode. That's kind of how they're teasing with the promo with Shikadai figuring it out. It seems super obvious, like him using the ice powers. I was like, he didn't even pay attention. Like obviously it was him going up against Boruto, Satoru Mitsuki, and then he just disappears using his ice powers. I was like, he didn't think that would kind of be super obvious. But clearly Boruto's dumb, because he was just like, oh, it's so cold, it's like ice, and it's like he didn't. I guess he just wasn't thinking. He just, it's just a fluke for him. It was just ice. So of course he's gonna get busted in the next episode. They're gonna go a bit further with what the leader of this gang is doing and how he's manipulating this kid, because he, at the end of the episode, he's like, oh, you're a good son, and the kid smiles, and it's like, he knows that he can manipulate this kid, because it's like, I think in this, obviously before that, but it was like in the midway point of the episode, someone asked like, are you sure about this? He's like, don't worry, he's just my little pawn. And then of course at the end he's like, I know exactly what to say to keep this kid around. He's like, you're a good son, and then he smiles. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's like they already teased in the beginning with the whole pawn being able to become a king and general and all that stuff. So they're already teasing it, and the kid will have some conflict of interest, all the normal stuff. But I am excited to see where they take it. I don't know if we should expect this to really expand super far. I don't know if this is, with this arc finally starting, I realize now that this is what the opening is kind of showing off, where I can't even think of the dude's name, but it's not Kaguya. Or maybe it is Kaguya. I don't. The third's grandson, whatever his name is, because it's like almost exactly the same. With him coming back, it may have something to do with this arc. I don't really know 100%, but I'm like, maybe that was the point of him being in it, not because of the last arc, but because of this one. So maybe we'll see him make a return, because they'll start struggling with the village or something like that. But I'm really excited for the next episode, mostly because it's showing the one kid's history, and it's like, this is why I chose to be this way. So we'll get to see like some crazy stuff in the Land of Snow, which I just want to see a new location. I just think that would be pretty fun. So that's really the main reason I'm kind of excited for that. So I'm looking forward to how that's going to play out. But ultimately, like I said, I wish this episode did more, but I didn't hate it. And I wasn't bored either, because like I said, the concepts, them talking was entertaining. I just felt like all that could have been compacted together, and then they could have just had like at least one cool, decent size action sequence, and be like, okay, that's a nice way to kind of, round it out. But it was kind of just like, it was all kind of stretched out, and then there was a lot of stuff with Boruto where I was like, that was kind of the main thing against this episode for me. There was so much with him I thought was just pointless, like him talking about like, oh, I'm gonna go to the doctor and stuff, and they do reference some more of the Boruto movie stuff where he's like, oh, I'm working on this thing so everyone can use any sort of jutsu, and I was like, okay, it's cool, they have the references, but it's like a bunch of irrelevant stuff, like him doing pretty much everything outside of that scene in the house, and him with the rest of the kids talking about it was useless. And I felt like there was so much of that where they were just talking about random stuff, and I'm like, I feel like this is totally pointless. I don't need to see Boruto. It's supposed to be about, seemingly based on the title, it's supposed to be more about Shikadai. So that was kind of my main gripe with it, where I felt like nothing was happening because there was so much with Boruto, and he wasn't with Shikadai. They weren't talking about it, and he was barely talking about the Byakuya gang until it got to like, you know, the scene with him and Himawari. But ultimately, I still thought it was an okay episode. Like I said, I wasn't bored watching it or anything like that. I was just like, I kind of just wish it would pick up a little. If they, close it, tighten it a little bit, action sequence, and then like I said, even those, super quick for both of them. So it was like, I wish we got just a little bit more out of that, so it could take away from what I felt was like empty, space. Just do a longer action sequence or something like that. But definitely looking forward to the next one, because I'm hoping it's going to be a pretty cool one where we see the land of snow and just see how all that stuff is going to play out, what they're going to talk about with this kid who's most likely an orphan. The guy says he's a good son, but I'm assuming that's not his actual dad. So probably see some stuff of that dead family, or, the whole thing. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to next week's episode. Of course, would love to know what you guys thought about this episode, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it, and naturally with us going forward and seemingly based on the promo, Shikadai figuring out that his kind of new friend is, one of the people, like the main person really of the Byakuya gang. How do you guys think that's gonna go? Like, what is gonna happen with this kid? I personally feel like they're gonna do the generic, crisis of conscience thing, where it's like, oh, I don't have to be this bad guy, but he's treated me so well, and then he realizes that the guy never actually cared, and so then he's gonna turn on him, and then they'll be like, we'll give you some sort of random thing and not send you away forever. It might be like Sumidi, where it's like, oh, you've turned around, no problem. Like, that's anime in general. That's almost storytelling in general, really. When it comes to like animated stuff, at least in live action, maybe not, but pretty much anything animated, that kind of tends to be the case. It was like, oh, you were a bad person, but you turned around at the last second, so it's cool. So I feel like that's where they're headed. He might not stick around, but I feel like that's what they're gonna do, and maybe they'll try to bring him back in a filler, something like that. But that's my theory on it. But I would love to know what you guys think is gonna happen with this revelation and what this kid is ultimately going to end up doing as a part of this gang. And like I said, definitely want to know what you guys thought about this episode, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.